The stars had forgotten about humans. 300 years passed since the last human voice spoke across the galaxy's communication networks. 300 years since Earth's massive colony ships disappeared into the dark between stars, carrying millions of sleeping people to find new homes. Most alien species believed humans were dead. Another failed race that destroyed itself with wars and pollution. The galaxy moved on without them, but something else filled the empty space humans left behind. Something terrible. The Vexar came first. They were tall, gray-skinned creatures with black eyes and sharp teeth. Their ships looked like metal daggers cutting through space. They appeared in the outer systems where humans used to trade, claiming the abandoned space stations and empty planets. At first, other species welcomed them. The galaxy needed someone to fill the role humans once played. The Vexar seemed peaceful enough. They traded fairly and followed galactic law, but that did not last long. Within 50 years, the Vexar had built an empire called the Hegemony. They made alliances with other warlike species. The snake-like Scythan joined them for promises of new hunting grounds. The insect Korth brought their hive ships filled with warrior drones. Together, they became unstoppable. The Hegemony's first real conquest was the peaceful Altarian Federation. The Altarians were blue-skinned humanoids who loved art, music, and diplomacy. They had no strong military. They believed all problems could be solved by talking. Admiral Kxtol of the Vexar fleet arrived at Vexar Prime with 100 warships. The Altarians sent their best diplomats to negotiate. Kxtol listened to their peaceful words for exactly 1 hour. Then he gave them a choice: surrender completely or watch their planet burn. The Altarian diplomats begged for time to discuss terms. Kxtol activated his flagship's main weapon instead. A beam of pure plasma shot down from orbit and turned the capital city into glass. 1 million Altarians died in seconds. These are our terms, Kxtol broadcast to the remaining Altarians. Submit or die. The Altarian Federation surrendered that day, but surrender did not save them. The Hegemony enslaved their people and stole their technology. They turned Altarian art into propaganda, and their music into weapons of war. Within 10 years, Altarian culture was almost completely destroyed. The galaxy watched in horror, but nobody could stop what came next. The Harmonites fell next. They were crystal beings who lived in floating cities and spoke through beautiful songs. Their music could heal sick minds and bring peace to violent hearts. The Hegemony could not allow such power to exist freely. Hegemony scientists created special machines called psychic dampeners. These devices made horrible noise that blocked the Harmonites' natural abilities. They could no longer sing their healing songs. They could barely think clearly. The Hegemony enslaved them and forced them to work in deep mines, cutting crystals for Hegemony weapons. The proud Thanx Clans tried to fight back. These were warrior people with forearms and thick armor-like skin. They had never lost a war in their 1,000-year history. Their honor code said death was better than surrender. The Hegemony respected their fighting spirit, so they offered the Thanx a deal: serve as shock troops for the Hegemony armies or watch their children die from a bioweapon that only affected Thanx DNA. Most Thanx chose to serve. Better to live as warriors, even for evil masters, than to watch their young ones suffer. But some chose death instead. Entire clans poisoned themselves rather than become tools of oppression. Year after year, the Hegemony grew stronger. They conquered the trade worlds of the Merchant Union. They destroyed the research stations of the Science Collective. They hunted down the nomad fleets of the Star Wanderers until only scattered survivors remained. The Hegemony's weapons became legends of terror across the galaxy. Their plasma cannons could turn whole continents into burning wastelands. Their bioweapons created plagues that made people sick in body and mind. Their psionic interrogators could break into any alien mind and steal thoughts, memories, and secrets. But their greatest weapon was fear itself. Species that had never seen Hegemony ships would surrender just hearing their name. Entire civilizations would destroy their own weapons and submit to slavery, rather than risk the Hegemony's anger. Fear spread faster than their fleets, conquering worlds before the first Hegemony soldier ever set foot on them. Admiral Kxtol became the most feared name in the galaxy. He commanded the largest Hegemony fleet and led their most important conquests. Alien mothers would whisper his name to make their children behave. Be good, or Kxtol will come for you in the night. The Admiral earned his reputation through cruelty. When the ocean world of Aquanus tried to hide their young and underwater cities, Kxtol poisoned their seas. When the desert people of Zerion used sandstorms to hide their rebels, he turned their planet's atmosphere into acid rain. When the tree cities of Verdania refused to surrender their sacred groves, he burned their forest from orbit and made their people watch. Every victory made the hegemony stronger and the galaxy weaker. Resistance became rare. Hope became almost extinct. The few free species that remained lived in constant fear. They hid in asteroid fields and dead systems, moving constantly to avoid hegemony patrols. They traded in whispers and secrets. They remembered better times only in sad songs sung quietly in the dark. Some tried to find allies outside the galaxy. They sent messages to distant star clusters, begging for help from unknown civilizations. But space was vast and empty. No help came. Others looked to their gods and ancient prophecies. Every major religion began to speak of a coming savior, someone who would return to break the chains of oppression. But prophecies were just words, and words could not stop plasma cannons. A few desperate groups tried to wake the sleeping powers of the galaxy. They searched for lost technologies and forgotten weapons. They explored dead worlds and ancient ruins. But the greatest powers of the past were gone. The galaxy's golden age was over. The hegemony controlled everything now. They decided which species lived and which died. They chose what could be built and what must be destroyed. They owned the trade routes, the communication networks, and the very laws that governed space travel. Admiral Kxtol stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the galaxy he had helped conquer. Thousands of star systems bowed to hegemony rule. Billions of alien creatures worked as slaves. Entire civilizations existed only to serve hegemony interests. But something bothered him. In all their conquests, they had never found humans. No bodies, no ruins, no trace of what happened to Earth's children. It was as if they had simply vanished into the dark between stars. Some hegemony scientists thought humans had died during their long journey to new worlds. Space travel was dangerous. Maybe their primitive ships had broken down or crashed into asteroids. Maybe they had run out of food or air. Others believed humans had found empty worlds far away and were building new civilizations in distant galaxies. If so, they were no threat to the hegemony. Space was infinite. There was room for everyone. Admiral Kxtol did not care either way. Humans were gone. Their old allies were conquered or extinct. The galaxy belonged to the hegemony now. But sometimes, in the quiet moments between battles, he wondered what humans had been like. The old records described them as clever but violent, creative but destructive. They had built beautiful cities and terrible weapons. They had created art and started wars. Most importantly, they had never surrendered. Even when Earth was dying, even when their people were scattered to the stars, they had never given up hope. The Admiral shook his head. Hope was a luxury the galaxy could no longer afford. The hegemony had crushed it out of every species they conquered, or so he believed. The sensors on Admiral Kxtol's flagship started screaming warnings at exactly 347 hours. Galactic Standard Time. Something massive was moving in the dead space near Kepler 442b, a worthless rock planet on the edge of hegemony territory. Kxtol walked to the main display screen, his black eyes reflecting the red warning lights. His bridge crew worked frantically at their stations, trying to understand what their instruments were telling them. "Report," the Admiral commanded, his voice sharp as broken glass. Lieutenant Vexar Gorath looked up from his scanner station. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures. Something is powering up in Grid 77 Alpha. The energy readings are..." "Impossible, sir." "Impossible how?" "The object is generating more power than a small star, Admiral. But there was nothing in that grid yesterday. Our last patrol reported empty space." Kxtol studied the tactical display. For 300 years, the hegemony had mapped every rock and gas cloud in this sector. Nothing should be able to hide from their sensors. Nothing this big could appear from nowhere. "Launch probe fighters," he ordered. "Full squadron. I want visual confirmation of whatever is out there." The probe fighters launched from the flagship's belly like angry wasps. They raced through space toward the energy signatures, their cameras and scanners recording everything. What they found made no sense. A ship hung in the darkness, but calling it a ship was like calling an ocean a puddle. The thing was enormous beyond belief, longer than most space stations, wider than some moons. Its hull was dark metal covered in strange patterns that seemed to shift and move in the starlight. "By the void," whispered Lieutenant Gorath. What is that thing? Admiral Kxtol had seen many ships in his career, alien designs from 100 different species, but this was something new. The hull design looked familiar somehow, but he could not place it. The proportions were wrong, too long, too sleek, too elegant. "Sir," called his communications officer, "we're receiving massive data transmissions from the object. Thousands of different signals on multiple frequencies. Any of them directed at us?" "No, sir, they appear to be internal communications. The ship is waking up, sir." As if responding to her words, lights began appearing along the massive hull. Not the harsh white lights of Hegemony ships, but warm yellow glows that reminded Kxtol of something he could not quite remember. The lights spread across the ship's surface like a wave, bringing dead metal to life. More ships began appearing from nowhere. Smaller vessels, but still enormous by normal standards. They materialized as if they had been sleeping in the dark space between atoms. Soon dozens of massive ships floated in formation around the first vessel. "Admiral," the communications officer said, her voice shaking, "I've identified the transmission protocols. Sir, these are Earth frequencies. These are human ships." The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of instruments. Human ships. But humans were extinct. Everyone knew that. They had disappeared 3 centuries ago, never to return. Admiral Kxtol felt something cold move through his chest. Not fear exactly. The Hegemony did not know fear, but uncertainty. For the first time in decades, he faced something unexpected. "Send a standard warning," he commanded. "Unknown vessels, you have entered Hegemony space without permission. Prepare to be boarded and inspected." The communications officer sent the message on all standard frequencies. The response came back immediately, but not in words. The largest human ship's hull began to change. Panels slid apart to reveal weapons the size of city blocks. Energy readings spiked so high that the Hegemony sensors could barely measure them. "Sir," Lieutenant Gorath said, his voice very quiet, "I think they're answering us." Admiral Kxtol had conquered 47 star systems in his career. He had broken the will of countless alien species. He knew how to deal with defiance, show overwhelming force, make them understand that resistance was hopeless. "Target their largest ship," he ordered. "Prepare the planet killer cannon. One demonstration shot across their bow should make our intentions clear." The flagship's main weapon was the pride of Hegemony engineering, a plasma cannon that could crack continents and boil oceans. No ship's shields could withstand its power. No armor could turn aside its fury. The weapon charged with a sound like thunder. Energy gathered in the massive barrel, bright enough to hurt the eyes. The crew watched their screens as targeting computers locked onto the human vessel. "Fire," Admiral Kxtol commanded. The planet killer spoke with the voice of a star. A beam of pure plasma, hotter than the core of a sun, lanced through space toward the human ship. It was not meant to destroy the vessel, only to demonstrate Hegemony power. The beam would pass close enough to overload their shields and disable their weapons. The plasma beam struck something 10 meters from the human ship's hull and simply vanished. Not reflected, not absorbed. Vanished as if it had never existed. "What just happened?" the Admiral demanded. "Unknown, sir," Lieutenant Gorath replied, his hands dancing over his instruments. "The energy just stopped existing. There's some kind of field around their ship that our sensors can't penetrate." "Impossible. Nothing can completely stop a planet killer shot." "Sir, I'm reading massive energy buildup from multiple human vessels. I think they're preparing to return fire." Admiral Kxtol felt the first real moment of doubt in his long career. The humans had technology the Hegemony did not understand, defenses they could not penetrate. And if their weapons matched their shields— "Sir," the communications officer shouted. Incoming transmission from the human flagship. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies, full spectrum. Put it on screen." The main display flickered and changed. Instead of tactical readouts, it showed the bridge of the human ship. A woman sat in the captain's chair, wearing a uniform of dark blue and silver. She was human, obviously, but something was different about her. Her eyes were sharper than they should be. Her movements too precise. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Prometheus," she said. "You fired upon my vessel without provocation. In the old days, this would be considered an act of war." Admiral Kxtol stepped forward, letting the camera see his full height and the scars that marked his victories. "I am Admiral Kxtol of the Hegemony 4th Fleet. This is Hegemony Space. You will surrender your ships for inspection or face the consequences. Captain Chen tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. Then she smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Admiral," she said, "I've been studying your hegemony for a very long time. 300 years to be precise. My ship's artificial intelligence has been listening to your communications, analyzing your tactics, learning your weaknesses. Impossible. Our encryption is based on mathematics my people solved before you discovered fire," Chen interrupted. "We know about Vexar Prime, we know about the Harmonites. We know about the Thanx Clans and every other species you've butchered or enslaved." The human captain stood up from her chair. Behind her, Admiral Kxtol could see other humans moving with the same enhanced precision. Their technology was clearly far beyond what humans had possessed 3 centuries ago. "You have exactly one opportunity," Captain Chen continued. "Withdraw your fleet from this system immediately. Release your slaves. Return to your home worlds and dismantle your war machine. Do this and humanity might show mercy." Admiral Kxtol laughed, but the sound felt forced even to his own ears. "You are one ship against my entire fleet. You cannot threaten the hegemony. One ship?" Captain Chen's smile widened. "Admiral, you're not paying attention." The tactical display suddenly filled with new contacts. Ships appeared throughout the system as if materializing from thin air, not just human vessels but creatures of impossible size moving between the stars, and everywhere the warm yellow lights that meant humanity had returned. "You see, Admiral," Captain Chen said, "we didn't just disappear 300 years ago. We've been preparing, building, learning, and now we're awake." The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Kxtol staring at a screen full of enemy ships. For the first time in his career, he was outnumbered. For the first time in decades, the hegemony faced an enemy they did not understand. "Sir," Lieutenant Gorath whispered. "What are your orders?" Admiral Kxtol looked at the tactical display. Hundreds of human ships surrounded his fleet. Their weapons were charged and ready. Their shields were impenetrable. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice was asking a question he had never needed to consider before. What if the hegemony could not win? Captain Sarah Chen opened her eyes to the sound of battle alarms. The cryopod's lid hissed open, releasing 3 centuries of stored dreams. Her body felt strange, enhanced by nanomachines that had rebuilt her cells while she slept. Her mind was sharper, faster, connected to systems she had never imagined when Earth was home. "Status report, Atlas," she said, sitting up as warm air filled her lungs. The artificial intelligence's voice filled the small chamber, calm despite the emergency. "Captain, we have been intercepted by hegemony forces approximately 47 minutes ago. I have followed Protocol 7 and begun emergency awakening procedures for essential personnel." Sarah stood on legs that felt stronger than she remembered. The enhancement process had worked perfectly. Every human aboard the Prometheus had been improved during their long sleep. Faster reflexes, better healing, enhanced intelligence, resistance to radiation, poison, and mental attacks. They had learned from Earth's mistakes. "Show me the galaxy." "Atlas." The chamber walls became transparent, revealing the bridge of the Prometheus around her. But that was not what made her heart sink. Holographic displays filled the air, showing 3 centuries of recorded history. Species enslaved, worlds destroyed, entire civilizations erased by the hegemony's endless hunger for conquest. Every ally humanity had known was gone. The peaceful Altarians who had taught humans about art and music, the wise Harmonites who could heal minds with their crystal songs, the proud Thanx warriors who had fought beside human soldiers in the old wars, all of them conquered, enslaved, their cultures destroyed. "How many ships do they have surrounding us?" Sarah asked, pulling on her enhanced uniform. 47 hegemony vessels, Captain, led by Admiral Kxtol, one of their most successful commanders. He has demanded our surrender. Sarah walked through her chamber's doorway onto the main bridge. Other officers were already at their stations, recently awakened from their own cryopods. They moved with the fluid grace of enhanced humans, their minds connecting wirelessly to the ship's systems. Commander James Torres looked up from the tactical station. "Captain, the hegemony just fired their main weapon at us. Some kind of plasma cannon. Damage report? None. Our quantum shields deflected the attack completely. They don't seem to understand our defensive technology." Sarah nodded. Atlas had spent 3 centuries analyzing every hegemony transmission, every technical specification they had ever broadcast. The AI had learned their weaknesses and designed countermeasures for all their weapons. Atlas, wake the military crews. All of them. Captain, that will mean awakening over 50,000 combat personnel. Are you certain? Sarah looked at the holographic displays showing the galaxy's current state. Billions of aliens living in slavery. Hundreds of species reduced to tools of the Hegemony war machine. Children born into chains who had never known freedom. Yes, wake them all. It's time the galaxy remembered what humans fight for. Deep in the Prometheus's military sections, cryopods began opening by the thousands. These were not ordinary humans. They were Earth's finest soldiers, chosen for this mission before the planet died. Enhanced not just with nanomachines, but with military implants that made them living weapons. Lieutenant Commander Elena Vasquez woke in the fighter bay, her mind immediately connecting to her ship's computer. Around her, other pilots were awakening in their own cockpits, their bodies already strapped into fighters that had been built during the long journey. Major David Kim opened his eyes in the Marine section, feeling the weight of powered armor settling around his enhanced frame. His soldiers were waking around him, each one a veteran of Earth's final wars. They had volunteered for this mission knowing they might wake to find their species extinct. Instead, they woke to find their species needed. Atlas, Sarah commanded from the bridge, open a channel to the Hegemony Admiral. The main screen filled with the image of Admiral Kxtol. Sarah had read his files during her awakening. A career built on fear and cruelty. Worlds burned at his command. Entire species enslaved under his watch. I am Admiral Kxtol of the Hegemony 4th Fleet, the alien said. This is Hegemony space. You will surrender your ships for inspection or face the consequences. Sarah studied him carefully, tall, gray-skinned, with the bearing of someone who had never known defeat. His bridge crew moved nervously behind him. They were afraid, but not of the humans. They were afraid of disappointing their admiral. Admiral, Sarah replied. I've been studying your hegemony for a very long time, 300 years to be precise. My ship's artificial intelligence has been listening to your communications, analyzing your tactics, learning your weaknesses. The admiral tried to interrupt, but Sarah continued. You have exactly one opportunity. Withdraw your fleet from this system immediately. Release your slaves. Return to your homeworlds and dismantle your war machine. Do this and humanity might show mercy. Admiral Kxtol laughed. You are one ship against my entire fleet. You cannot threaten the hegemony. Sarah smiled. It felt good to smile after 3 centuries of sleep. One ship? Admiral, you're not paying attention. She gestured to Atlas and the AI-activated systems that had been building for decades. Throughout the Kepler system, other human ships began decloaking. Not just colony vessels, but warships that had been constructed during the journey. Factories in space that had never stopped working. Weapons platforms disguised as asteroids. The Prometheus itself began to transform. Its civilian hull opened like a flower, revealing the military fortress hidden inside. Fighter craft poured from launch bays like angry bees. Weapon systems that had been concealed for centuries powered up with the light of small suns. You see, Admiral, Sarah said, we didn't just disappear 300 years ago. We've been preparing, building, learning, and now we're awake. She ended the transmission and turned to her crew. All hands, this is the captain. For 300 years we have slept while the galaxy burned. We wake to find our friends enslaved and our enemies triumphant. This ends today. The bridge crew worked with enhanced efficiency, their minds processing information faster than any baseline human could manage. They had trained for this moment their entire lives, then slept while their bodies were improved beyond human limits. Tactical. What's our situation? Sarah asked. Commander Torres answered without looking up from his station. We have them surrounded, Captain. 47 hegemony ships against over 300 human vessels. Our weapons are charged and ready. Commander Vasquez, report from the fighter wing. Elena's voice came through the communication system from her cockpit. All fighters launched and in formation, Captain. We have 1,500 pilots ready for combat. Our neural link systems are operating perfectly. Major Kim, ground forces status? David's voice was calm despite the situation. 30,000 Marines ready for deployment, Captain. Our power armor is functioning within normal parameters. If you need us to take any hegemony ships intact, we can do it. Sarah nodded. The humans were ready. But this was about more than just winning a battle. This was about sending a message to the galaxy. After 3 centuries of oppression, hope had returned. Atlas broadcast on all frequencies. Full spectrum, every communication channel in the galaxy. Channel open, Captain. Sarah stood up, knowing that her words would be heard on every world, every ship, every slave camp in hegemony space. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of a species that had survived the death of their homeworld. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Prometheus, speaking for all humanity. For 300 years you have lived under the boot of the hegemony. You have watched your children enslaved, your cultures destroyed, your hope crushed. On the tactical display, hegemony ships were beginning to move, trying to form defensive formations. But they were too slow, their tactics too predictable. Atlas had studied them for centuries and knew their every move before they made it. We are the descendants of Earth, Sarah continued. We are the children of a world that died so we could live. We have slept for 3 centuries and we have awakened to find the galaxy in chains. The first hegemony ship opened fire. Plasma cannons that could destroy cities launched their fury at the human fleet. The attack struck human shields and vanished harmlessly, absorbed by technology the hegemony could not understand. But chains can be broken, Sarah said. Tyranny can be defeated. And slavery can end. Today the galaxy learns that humanity has returned, and we bring with us the one thing the hegemony cannot destroy. Human weapons fired for the first time in 3 centuries. But these were not the crude weapons of old Earth. These were smart weapons guided by artificial intelligence. Weapons that adapted to enemy defenses and learned from every shot. The hegemony shields, designed to stop plasma and particle beams, offered no protection against human quantum disruptors. 3 hegemony ships simply stopped existing, their atoms scattered across space. We bring hope, Sarah finished. The battle was over before it truly began. Admiral Kxtol's fleet, the terror of the galaxy, fled with half their ships destroyed. They carried with them news that would shake the hegemony to its core. Humanity had returned. And they were nothing like what the galaxy remembered. The news spread faster than light itself through the galaxy's quantum communication networks. In slave camps on distant worlds, in hidden rebel bases, in the deepest prisons of the hegemony empire, the impossible message reached every corner of known space. Humanity had returned. Admiral Kxtol's surviving ships limped back to hegemony space, carrying reports that the High Command refused to believe. Humans with weapons that could unmake matter itself. Ships that appeared from nowhere. Technology that made their finest weapons useless. But the evidence was undeniable. 3 hegemony destroyers had simply vanished, their atoms scattered to cosmic dust. The pride of the 4th Fleet had fled from creatures the galaxy thought extinct. On the bridge of the UES Prometheus, Captain Sarah Chen watched as her ship's long-range sensors detected the awakening signals from across the galaxy. Green lights appeared on the tactical display as one by one. Other human ships began their emergency wake-up procedures. Atlas, how many ships are responding to our signal? 43 colony vessels have confirmed successful awakening protocols, Captain. Total population approximately 172 million humans. Military assets include 215 capital ships, over 8,000 fighters, and multiple manufacturing platforms. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that so many had survived the journey. Sadness for the ships that would never answer their call, lost to the cold dark between stars. Any word from the UES Defiance? Commander Elena Vasquez's ship is responding normally, Captain. She reports successful awakening of all military personnel. Her fleet is moving toward the Altarian system as planned. The plan had been simple in concept, terrifying in execution. Each human fleet would target a different hegemony stronghold simultaneously. Not to conquer, but to liberate. To show the galaxy that the age of fear was ending. Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching Vexar Prime grow larger on the main screen. The planet that had once been the cultural heart of the galaxy was now a hegemony fortress world. Its beautiful crystal cities had been replaced with gray military installations. Its artistic monuments had been torn down and replaced with statues of hegemony leaders. Commander, her tactical officer reported, we're detecting massive defensive installations in orbit. Over 300 weapon platforms and a full hegemony battle fleet. Elena nodded. She had expected heavy resistance. Vexar Prime was too important for the hegemony to leave lightly defended. But human intelligence was 3 centuries ahead of hegemony technology. Launch the Liberation Protocol, she ordered. Around the Defiance, space filled with thousands of small objects that looked like metallic seeds. They spread out through the system, each one guided by a fragment of human artificial intelligence. The hegemony sensors could not track them all. The metallic seeds reached their targets within minutes. Hegemony weapon platforms suddenly found their systems invaded by viruses that turned their own weapons against each other. Communication networks carried false orders that sent ships to the wrong positions. Shield generators began broadcasting on frequencies that blinded their own sensors. All fighters begin liberation runs, Elena commanded. Remember, we're here to free slaves, not destroy worlds. The human fighters that launched from the Defiance were works of art as much as weapons of war. Each pilot was connected to their ship through neural implants that had been improved during the long sleep. They did not just fly their fighters, they became them. Lieutenant Marcus Webb dove his fighter toward Alteria Prime's surface. His mind merged with his ship's computer. He could feel the air currents around his wings, sense the heat of his engines, experience the electromagnetic spectrum as colors that had no names. His target was a slave camp outside the ruins of the old Altarian capital. Intelligence reports showed over 50,000 Altarians imprisoned there, forced to mine rare crystals for hegemony weapons. Hegemony fighters rose to meet him, but they moved like they were swimming through thick liquid compared to human reflexes. Marcus twisted his ship through maneuvers that should have torn it apart, his enhanced body handling G-forces that would kill a normal person. The hegemony fighters' weapons could not target something that moved like liquid thought. Marcus's ship danced between their plasma bolts, returning fire with precision that was mathematically perfect. Each shot disabled rather than destroyed, sending enemy fighters spinning safely toward the ground. On the planet's surface, Major David Kim led his Marines toward the slave camp's main gate. His powered armor made him look like a walking tank, but he moved with the grace of a dancer. Behind him, 1,000 human soldiers advanced through the hegemony's impregnable defenses. The hegemony had built their fortifications to stop conventional attacks. They had not planned for humans who could phase through solid walls, or weapons that could shut down electronics from a distance, or soldiers who could coordinate their actions through a shared mental network. "Breach the main gate," David ordered. His voice transmitted directly to his soldiers' minds. Sergeant Lisa Park placed her hand on the massive metal barrier that kept the Altarians imprisoned. Her armor's systems analyzed the gate's molecular structure in microseconds, then generated a field that caused the metal to simply flow apart like water. The hegemony guards inside the camp raised their weapons, but they moved too slowly. Human soldiers appeared behind them like ghosts, stunning them with neural disruptors before they could fire a shot. Major Kim walked into the camp's central courtyard, where thousands of Altarians huddled in fear. They were thin and pale, their natural blue skin turned gray by malnutrition and despair. Most had never seen a human before, but somehow they knew these strange creatures were not their enemies. "I am Major David Kim of the United Earth Marine Corps," he announced, his armor's translation systems converting his words into perfect Altarian. "By order of Captain Sarah Chen and the authority of humanity, this camp is liberated. You are free." An old Altarian male stepped forward, his body shaking with age and exhaustion. "Free?" he whispered. "But the hegemony, they will come back. They always come back." David removed his helmet, showing the Altarians his human face. "Not anymore. Humanity has returned to the galaxy. The age of the hegemony is ending." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy as human fleets struck at hegemony strongholds. The crystal cities of the Harmonites were liberated from their psychic dampening fields. The proud Thanx Clans were freed from their forced service. Dozens of species that had lived in slavery for generations saw daylight for the first time in centuries. But humanity's greatest victory was not military. It was the simple act of showing mercy. When hegemony soldiers surrendered, humans did not execute them. When hegemony civilians were captured, humans did not enslave them. When entire hegemony worlds fell, humans offered their people a choice: continue the cycle of oppression, or help build something better. On the hegemony world of Vexar Minor, Captain John Harrison accepted the surrender of an entire hegemony fleet. The enemy admiral, a Scythian named Asisvek, expected to be tortured for information or killed as an example. Instead, Captain Harrison offered him coffee and showed him recordings of the liberated worlds. Not propaganda, but simple truth. Former slaves rebuilding their cultures, Children playing freely for the first time in their lives. Species working together to heal the wounds of 3 centuries. Why do you show me this? Sivek asked, his serpentine voice filled with confusion. Because you have a choice to make, Harrison replied. You can continue serving an empire built on fear and pain, or you can help us build something better. The choice is yours. It was a choice the galaxy had not been offered in 300 years. The choice to be something other than victim or oppressor. The choice to hope. Not every hegemony commander chose surrender. Not every battle ended in human victory. The hegemony still controlled vast fleets and countless worlds. But for the first time in centuries, they were afraid. Admiral Kxtol stood in the high command chamber on the hegemony capital world, facing questions from his superiors that he could not answer. How had primitive humans developed such advanced technology? How had they hidden entire fleets for 3 centuries? How could they be stopped? The humans are not what we expected, he admitted to the assembled commanders. They fight with coordination we cannot match. Their weapons use principles we do not understand. And worst of all what? Demanded Supreme Overlord Thakmore, ruler of the Hegemony Empire. They show mercy, my lord. To their enemies. To our people. They offer choice instead of chains. And some of our own forces are beginning to listen. The Supreme Overlord's eyes burned with rage. Then we will show them no mercy in return. Ready the doomsday fleets. Prepare the planet killers. If we cannot rule the galaxy, we will burn it before we surrender it. But in the deep places of the Hegemony capital, in the slave quarters and work camps, whispered stories spread like wildfire. Stories of humans who fought not for conquest but for freedom. Stories of an ancient promise finally kept. The galaxy was waking up, and it was beginning to remember what hope felt like. The final battle began at Vexar Prime, the throne world of the Hegemony Empire. It was a fortress planet covered in weapons that could destroy entire fleets, cities built like military bases. Mountains hollowed out and filled with factories that produced instruments of war. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus as the combined human fleet approached the enemy capital. Around her flagship flew ships from every species the hegemony had oppressed. Altarian vessels with hulls that sang like crystal bells. Harmonite ships that moved like living creatures. Thanx warships bristling with weapons and burning for revenge. But this was not an army of conquest. This was an army of liberation. Atlas status report on the enemy defenses. Vexar Prime is protected by over 15,000 weapon platforms, Captain. They have enough firepower to glass a continent every second. Supreme Overlord Thakmore appears to be preparing some kind of final weapon. Sarah studied the tactical displays. The hegemony had gathered their remaining forces here for one last stand. Every ship they could spare. Every weapon they could build. If humanity failed here, the war could continue for decades. What kind of final weapon? Unknown, Captain. But energy readings suggest they are preparing to crack the planet's core. A final act of spite that would destroy their own capital rather than see it fall. Sarah felt a cold anger building in her chest. Even facing defeat, the hegemony chose destruction over surrender. They would rather kill billions of their own people than admit they were wrong. Open a channel to all ships. Full spectrum broadcast. The communication system connected her to every vessel in the Liberation Fleet. Human ships, Altarian vessels, Thanx warships, Harmonite seed ships that carried the survivors of an almost extinct species. All ships, this is Captain Chen. We have come to the heart of the Hegemony Empire, the last stronghold of tyranny in our galaxy. Today we end 3 centuries of oppression. On her tactical display, she could see the enemy fleet moving into defensive positions. Thousands of ships preparing for the battle that would decide the galaxy's future. But Sarah knew this war would not be won with weapons alone. But we are not here as conquerors, she continued. We are here as liberators. Our enemy thinks strength comes from fear. They believe power comes from the ability to destroy. Today we show them they are wrong. She gestured to Atlas, and the AI began transmitting on frequencies the hegemony had never imagined could be used for communication. Frequencies that reached not just their ships, but every communication device on the planet below. Citizens of Vexar Prime. Sarah's voice echoed through every street and building on the hegemony capital. You have been told that humans are your enemies. You have been told that we come to destroy your world and enslave your people. This is a lie. On the planet's surface, in the deep industrial levels where the Vexar working class lived in poverty, alien faces turned toward hidden screens and secret receivers. For the first time in their lives, they heard words that were not commands or threats. 300 years ago, Atlas began studying your history, not the propaganda your leaders spread, but the truth, and we learned something your rulers hoped you would never know. The AI released the data it had gathered over 3 centuries of listening. Archaeological records, genetic analyses, cultural patterns hidden in the deepest archives, information that painted a picture the Hegemony had worked desperately to erase. You were not always conquerors, Sarah said, her words reaching every corner of the Hegemony capital. Before the Hegemony, your people were artists and philosophers. You built cities of beauty and wonder. You created art that could make stone weep and music that could heal the sick. In the working districts of Vexar Prime, an old factory worker named Kxtol stopped his assembly line and stared at a hidden screen. The images showed ancient ruins on his homeworld, sculptures and paintings created by his ancestors, beautiful things that had been declared illegal by the Hegemony centuries ago. Your current rulers are not even your true leaders, Sarah continued. They are descendants of the first Hegemony that conquered your species 800 years ago. They destroyed your culture and rebuilt it as a weapon. They made you forget who you truly were. Supreme Overlord Thakmore watched from his throne room as the human transmission spread through his capital like a virus. His own people were seeing their real history for the first time. The truth he had spent his entire life hiding. "Guards," he screamed. "Cut the transmission. Shut down all receivers." But it was too late. The truth spread faster than his soldiers could move. In every district of his capital, Vextar citizens saw proof that their entire civilization was built on lies. They had been victims, not victors. Slaves, not masters. "You have a choice," Sarah said as her transmission reached its climax. "You can continue serving the lie that enslaved your people, or you can remember who you truly are. The choice is yours." The revolution began in the factory districts and spread outward like a wave. Vextar workers put down their tools and walked away from their assembly lines. Soldiers threw down their weapons and refused to obey orders. Citizens poured into the streets demanding answers from leaders who had no truth to offer. In his throne room, Supreme Overlord Thakmore faced the collapse of everything he had built. His empire was crumbling not from human weapons, but from the power of truth itself. "Activate the core breaker," he commanded his remaining loyal guards. "If I cannot rule this galaxy, I will see it burn." The planet-killing weapon began its charging sequence deep beneath the capital, enough energy to crack Vexar Prime's core and turn the entire world into a star. It would kill everyone on the planet, including Thakmore himself, but it would also destroy the human fleet in orbit. Sarah detected the energy buildup immediately. "Atlas, how long until the weapon fires?" "Approximately 18 minutes, Captain. If it detonates, the explosion will be visible from neighboring star systems." "Can we stop it?" "Not with conventional weapons, Captain. The device is buried too deep beneath the planet's surface, but there may be another way." On the planet below, the revolution was spreading through the capital like wildfire. Vextar citizens stormed government buildings and military bases. They found the hidden archives where their true history had been stored. They discovered the propaganda centers where their children had been taught to hate and fear. Commander Elena Vasquez led a strike team through the palace toward Thakmore's throne room. Her enhanced soldiers moved like shadows through corridors filled with abandoned defenses. The Hegemony guards had mostly fled or joined the revolution. She found the Supreme Overlord alone in his massive throne chamber, staring at displays that showed his empire falling apart around him. He was a smaller creature than she had expected, ancient and bitter, with eyes that burned with hatred for everything he could not control. "Supreme Overlord Thakmore," Elena said, removing her helmet so he could see her human face. "I am Commander Elena Vasquez. By the authority of humanity and the free species of this galaxy, you are under arrest for crimes against sentient life." Thakmore laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You are too late, human. In 15 minutes this world dies, and your precious fleet dies with it." "We know about the core breaker," Elena replied calmly. "We also know you're the only one who can stop it." "Why would I do that? My empire is destroyed. My people have betrayed me. Better that we all burn together." Elena stepped closer to the fallen dictator. "Because despite everything you've done, we're offering you the same choice we offered everyone else. You can choose to be something other than what they made you." She gestured to her soldiers, who placed a small device on the throne room's main display. It showed scenes from across the galaxy, Former slaves rebuilding their worlds, children playing freely, species working together to heal the wounds of centuries. This is what we're building, Elena said. Not an empire based on fear, but a community based on choice. You can be part of that or you can die alone in the dark. But either way, that weapon will not fire. Thakmore stared at the images, seeing a galaxy he had never imagined possible. A galaxy where strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the willingness to protect. Where power came not from fear, but from hope. For the first time in his long life, he faced a choice that was truly his own. The countdown reached 0. The core breaker weapon powered down safely. Supreme Overlord Thakmore sat in his empty throne room, looking at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. I had forgotten, he whispered. I had forgotten what we were before they made us into this. Elena nodded. It's not too late to remember. The war ended not with a battle, but with a choice. The choice to break the cycle of violence that had consumed the galaxy for 3 centuries. The choice to believe that enemies could become allies, that slaves could become free, that even the darkest tyranny could be redeemed. Months later, Captain Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Alteria Prime space station. Through the transparent walls, she could see ships from dozens of species working together to repair the damage of 3 centuries. Human vessels worked alongside Alterian art ships. Thanx warriors shared patrol duties with former Hegemony soldiers who had chosen freedom.